What's your thoughts on government cover-ups or covert societies attempting to control humanity? Do you believe in ancient astronauts, intergalactic communication, or extraterrestrial visitations? Ever had an experience with disembodied spirits or the paranormal universe? Are these subjects fact or fiction? Each week, Tony and Eddie explore these unbelievable realities and beyond. Exclusively on Truth Be Told.
Hello and welcome to Truth Be Told with Tony and Eddie, where we believe in experience becomes truth. I'm your host, Tony Sweet, and joining me now in studio is world-renowned psychic Eddie Conn.
Thank you, Tony. Now, most ghostly phenomenon can be very scary for most people and often labeled as what? Unexplained mysteries. Ooh. Tonight, we're diving into the world of the mystical with author and paranormal investigator Stephen Lancaster.
Stephen's research focuses on investigating testaments of the supernatural. He is a producer of Monster Vision TV and an independent paranormal investigative program with nearly 2 million views worldwide.
And in 2011, he began hosting the paranormal show Shadow Walker Radio on Pararock TV. Now, Mr. Lancaster has also appeared in various television programs about other paranormal subjects, Tony.
Stephen's latest book, Dark Spirits, A Man Terrorized by the Supernatural, explores paranormal cases, one of which is a mysterious hotel room that drives occupants mad, and the second is about a plantation that made heavily armed investigators fight for their lives.
Now that sounds scary. We're going to have to ask him if it's in New Orleans. Stephen will also tell us about the dark entity that actually followed him home, making his life a living hell. These frightening stories and much more await you in Stephen's book, Dark Spirits, which is a compilation of haunted cases that no one has been able to explain or forget. Please welcome to the show author Stephen Lancaster.
Welcome, Stephen. How you doing? Welcome to the show. What's going on? Hello, hello. Can you hear us? I think. Hello?
Testing.
Testing. 1, 2, 3.
I can hear you.
Oh, you are not right. You are not right. You're just like, what? Well, welcome. We are so excited. Like I said, you and Alan in the first hour are bringing in our paranormal month. So this is exciting to be talking with a real live investigator.
Yeah.
The vampire guy. You guys had the vampire guy.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. He was very fascinating. Eddie said he'd love to go over and.
No, I know.
Okay,
no, I'm not going over there.
Did he? I didn't get to listen because I just got here. But did he mention the fact that what's that guy's name? Vlad.
Vlad, yeah, the Impaler.
Is that how you say it?
Yep.
In a southern accent, is it Vlad?
Vlad.
Wasn't the actual castle for sale?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which I
I would love to have that.
Wouldn't you? Yeah.
And Prince.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Prince Charles literally is a relative of Vlad, and he has bought property in that area of the world to make sure that those houses are preserved. And you can Airbnb them as well, Stephen.
There you go.
There's only 500,000 to 1.5 million people that have been impaled on that property.
Yeah.
I'm sure you would sleep really good.
Right. Well, I want to go back and get you started. I want to hear about your story because we've heard Eddie growing up, as a little psychic in North Carolina. I growing up in Kansas, I saw a ghost in my house that I grew up in. So tell us about little Stephen growing up. What got you interested in the paranormal world?
Oh, I was just telling my girlfriend earlier. It gets so boring telling the same story over and over. But you got to.
You got to.
I understand the media world, so to speak. Because somebody's hearing it for the first time.
Right.
For me, it was 1987, and I was 10 years old. And I slept on these bunk beds with my brother, 5-year difference between us. and I was on the top bunk, you know, and he was on the bottom, and I kept feeling this pulling, something messing with my feet, my ankles, what have you, and I would look over the rail, and he's fast asleep, and this would happen over and over and over again. Till eventually, it got to the point where it became violent, and it actually pulled me up and flipped me over to where my head was now at the bottom of the bed, and my stomach's facing this way. And I don't know if people can see video. I don't know if I'm doing all this hand stuff.
Yeah, we can see it. We can see it.
You're doing dark spirit voguing.
And anyway, it flipped me over, and I sat back up and stuck my arms out, trying to figure out what was going on, and something grabbed me around the wrist. But that feeling, when something grabs you. And it did it with such force. I'm a 10-year-old kid, and I'm kind of fighting this, but I couldn't do anything. I couldn't say anything. I just felt impotent, so to speak. And I pulled and I pulled and I pulled, and finally it let go of me. And when it did, I was pulling with such force that I flew back across my entire bed, and not in some horror movie way flying. I mean, just, somebody let go and he flew back.
Right.
And my head hit the paneling, the wood paneling of the wall, and put a dent in. That's how much force that I was pulling. That when it finally released, I dented the wall. And it was at that point that everything came back to me, the reality came back to me, and I could scream for my mother, I could scream for my father, and they came into the room, assessed the situation, and of course dismissed it as a nightmare.
Of course.
Right. Now that's a 10-year-old boy. So I don't want to get into it too much.
Right.
My first book kind of covers the evolution of me, so to speak. But in my house, I went to a Christian academy. My father worked for the government. He was a rocket scientist, recently retired.
Wow.
And you just don't talk about these kind of things.
Right.
When you have 4 uncles who are Baptist preachers, you just don't discuss this stuff. So I had to sneak in literature, and then, of course, as I got older and I got into high school, it was sneaking in Marilyn Manson albums, and stuff like that. Right. But I just read. That's all I did for about 10 years. Is I just read, like, okay, did this thing in Mexico really happen? With Area 51, did this crypto thing really happen in the 50s? And I just read all these things, and it was finally until 1997, a friend came to me and said, "Hey, man," and you got to keep in mind this is back when nobody talked about this stuff.
Nope. Right, not at all.
Today with ghost hunters and Zach Baggins and all this stuff, everybody wants to tell their ghost story, but back then you didn't talk about it. And I had a friend come to me in 97. He said, "Hey, you're into all this stuff. You're into the weird and the ghosts and aliens and all this. Hey, I've got something you got to check out." So I kind of took my first case, and for a long time, I would say probably for 10 years until about 2007, nobody wanted this stuff talked about. I took cases for politicians. I took cases for military.
Mm-hmm.
It was I became this guy that the Mulder of my generation, I guess, so to speak. But after that, all of a sudden, it became this. Oh, nobody cares. Let's all talk about it, But yeah, it's how I got my start. I had this thing happen to me when I was a kid. My brother has no recollection of it. He slept through the whole thing.
Every time?
And, and it just kind of went from there.
Well, I think it's funny that you say, you're tired of talking about it, but people that still don't tell their story it gives them validation of like, I'm not crazy.
Yeah.
I'm not crazy. So I appreciate you telling that story. Yeah, very fascinating.
Well, and also I appreciate the fact because there was a time I grew up really psychic in the South, in North Carolina, and again, Southern Baptist, Presbyterian, Methodist, you name it. Let's all kiss snakes and wave Bibles in the air, and Jesus will forgive us, okay? Unless you're homosexual like me, and for some reason that didn't work. But I remember
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Right. But no one talked about psychic phenomenon. No one talked about ghosts. No one talked about seeing angels or spirit guides either. And it's somewhere around the early 90s, very early 90s, remember the Psychic Friends Network came out with Linda Georgian and Dionne Warwick.
Right.
And the reason that network was hugely successful is you could contact them from the privacy of your own home, and nobody but Pac Bell and AT&T were going to know that you were talking to them. And then it started to trickle out. Then it started to be in vogue somewhere in the early 2000s. And you're saying the same thing about the ghost phenomenon and the dark spirits, if you will. And I was going to ask you, did your brother ever have an experience like that, or was it just targeting you?
Well, still to this day, he makes fun of me. On my personal Facebook page where I'm just linked up with friends, loved ones, stuff like that. I have the Facebook that does the whole, hey, I'm the ghost guy thing. But I have my personal one. He still makes fun of me today. He doesn't believe it. I remember vividly, since you asked that question, maybe about this time last year, a little earlier, he had come to see me. I was living in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina at the time. And he came down and we started talking about aliens. And he was just like, you're an idiot. He's like, the ghosts don't exist. And every time I make and he may make a comment on the fact that I posted about this show tonight. I mean, he's always there. He does not believe. But he saw things. I don't know whether he's in denial about it. That's up to him to decide. But in the first book, I talk about how every couple of years these things would happen, and he actually witnessed one of them. He was actually the reason that I saw what I did. And there was a particular situation where we're outside the house, and we're the boys of the house. We're the men of the house, so to speak. Mom and dad's at work, and whatever happens to the house is on us. And he said that there was a man looking out his bedroom window, and it made us all look up. There were a few neighborhood friends, like neighborhood friends like the Goonies or Stand By Me neighborhood friends, and we're all looking up. And when we did, it's like straight out of a movie. His bedroom window shattered.
Whoa!
But it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't like super slow motion. Glass flying everywhere. It just broke, and I was scared. I felt like, oh, somebody is in the house, and Dad, he's going to be pissed that
Right.
that I'm the guy. I'm supposed to be watching this. So I grabbed a baseball bat. I remember this so vividly, and I run into the house. I run up to my brother's room, and I can see the glass. And what's interesting about that, and this was probably 1990. This was before I got into the whole actually taking other people's cases. The glass was all on the inside.
Oh.
So
Wow.
It came from the outside, yet we were all standing there. And eventually my brother catches up to me and our neighborhood friends, and we're all looking at it. And I even looked at my brother and I said, we're going to get the blame for this. And that's exactly what happened. Dad came home, Mom came home. We're the ones that did it. We shot it with a BB gun, whatever. We broke that window. But he saw an old man looking down right before the window shattered.
Wow.
And this was the same house I had my experience.
So
Same house, same room?
No,
Oh, okay.
not the same room,
Oh,
but the same house.
So you kids were outside and you saw the man inside of the house looking down at you?
Right. It was just for a split second. I
Right.
mean, we were outside. I don't know, playing G.I. Joe. I don't know.
Evil
I was
Knievel.
15. My brother was 10. Most of the kids that hung out with us were about the same age as him, 10, 11 years old. We're all outside in the backyard around some pine trees.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, Steven, there's somebody in the house. And we all look up and we all saw this slender old man. He wasn't intimidating. He was just looking out the window, and then bam, it all shattered, and I was in the house. Like there is somebody physically in the house, and there was nobody there. But to answer your question, my brother still to this day does not believe any of it. He makes fun of me. He calls me Ghostbuster. It's a joke to him. Yeah. Whether or not that's his, my background's in psychology, so I have what I think about my brother Shane, but I think it's his way of trying to block it all out.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Whereas as I embraced it all, and I wanted to know why.
So, Stephen, when you guys, when you got a little older, did you ever do any research on the house to see who died there, who passed away, if there was any kind of like traumatic stuff back in the day?
Well, here's what's funny is when we were kids, back in the Goondocks, our neighbor, maybe 2-3 houses up, she was a self-proclaimed witch. It was like the whole area I lived in was this reality show waiting to happen, but it never did because this was before all that. But a few houses up, I remember I used to ride my bike up and down the street, and this guy stopped me and he told me the story of the house, that he was actually the guy who sold the house to my parents, and he told me that this old man had unfortunately committed suicide in the attic.
How'd he do it?
He hanged himself, however you properly say that.
Stephen, I'm gonna Eddie. When you were talking, Eddie just wrote hanging in the rafters. So,
there you go.
Good job, Eddie.
Yeah, but well, go ahead, finish that because I have a theory here about it. But I wanted to write that down before you answer. Oh my God, I just saw a big red thing of light go to the right across the screen where you're at. Wow. So
he's like there.
Yeah. It just literally goes this way. But so there was something like this that I saw on a show back in the day. Then we caught up with some people. We talked about them. There was a spirit of an not old man, 50s, but to a little kid, a 50-year-old is an old man. And this man would stand outside of the window, and the kid did not know that it was a spirit or a ghost for a long time. But the man was sexually abusing the boys in that house when he was alive.
Oh, wow.
And so the sheets would get pulled on the little boy's bed. All kinds of weird things would happen. This thing would grab him. And long story short, back in the day, the people in that community, and it was Louisiana, they found out that this adult male was molesting these boys, and they went on a witch hunt. They ended up chasing him into the river, and he drowned. But it was such a scary, traumatic death that the man, when there's boys in that property now, years and years and years later, he will still show up at the edge of the woods and try to get the boys to open the window and let him in the house. The dark spirit will do that. So I was just deadly curious here. That's a terrible adjective. If there was some other thing separate from this man's hanging, if there was some odd, off-balanced sexual behavior here too, connected to another being.
And there may be. There may be. As a kid, I was never told anything other than what I've already said. Guy was found hanging in the attic. There are other experiences in the house, which I really hate how the media and production works. The first book that I released, I covered it all, everything. And once the publisher got a hold of it, and I do love my publisher. I love you guys, but telling me to streamline things and cut things out and make it X amount of words does not tell the story.
Right.
And they re-released the book and they took so much out. They took so much out. And I remember parts that they took out were me being a kid and seeing a baby in my room, and there was no baby. You know what I mean? My parents didn't have another baby. It was, I woke up and I walk over and there's this baby. You know, then I go back to my bed for some reason, go to sleep. Maybe it'll go away. I don't know. But that's what happened, you know, but they take these things out. There was a lot that happened in that house.
Yeah.
And it kind of makes me believe that, especially happening when you're that age, and then knowing what I know now, all these years later, 20 years in the field, that, you know, people say, hey, I was talking to a child. It was a child spirit. Mm-hmm. Or hey, I'm talking to this old man, or hey, I'm talking to this guy, or this girl, or whatever. But I've come to the belief that, you know, they say right before you die, your whole life flashes before your eyes, right?
Yep.
I'll be the first to tell you that doesn't happen.
But have you died?
It doesn't happen.
Really?
No, I died. Didn't happen. But that doesn't mean it doesn't happen to somebody else. I'm just saying that's what didn't happen to me.
Okay.
But as far as the spiritual realm is concerned, if I were to die right now, hopefully not during your show, although you
that
get a lot
good.
of hits.
I was going to say that'd be good ratings.
Lord.
Yeah, you know, maybe afterward or tomorrow, if that were to happen, and I came back in some form, something we can't measure, I'm going to tell stories like we do now, like we do with film, like we do with TV, like we do with literature. So maybe what we're seeing with ghosts, as we know them by definition, is just somebody's life.
Yeah.
You know, when they say, hey, I was talking to that little girl. And the reason I say this, you guys, this is the first time I've ever met you. When I do investigations, it's for years at the same location, because you can't be the client in one night.
That's right. Okay,
you can't experience what they experienced in 6 hours like they show you on Ghost Hunters.
Yeah.
Okay, you can't. So me and the colleagues that I work with live these things. In some cases, actually move in to the locations, which I've done. And you experience these children, you experience these adults, and people will they'll say, "Oh, this place is super haunted. There are ghosts everywhere." Maybe it's just one. Maybe all we are seeing is their life. This is a memory that they decided to show us from when they were a kid, or this is a memory from when they were middle-aged, or whatever. It's all magnetic, so to speak.
Yeah. Well,
we could go on forever.
But
you're
great.
so good at that.
This is great.
So, from your perspective, Stephen, will you tell the audience the difference between what would be considered a light spirit versus a dark spirit? And because we're going to ask you a little bit more about dark spirits, a man terrorized by the supernatural, we're assuming that's you, right?
My definition of a dark spirit is probably a lot different than most people's definition.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is I don't mean this to make fun of somebody's perception or religion, or, you know, what they think is a dark spirit. I am an atheist. It's hard to believe. I hear that all the time. So I don't believe in demons. So when people say, oh, there's demonic possession, there's a demon, there's some kind, you know, all this Hollywood stuff, I don't believe it, because to say that word means that you are placing religion into what you're trying to prove or disprove. And well, religion hasn't been proven or disproven, so
Right.
you can't do that. To be completely unbiased, to me, I believe, and you said we can say anything.
Yes.
If you are an asshole in real life, if you raped people, if you were a child molester, if you killed people, if you are a murderer, that's what you're going to be in the afterlife. The only difference is you're going to have attributes that we don't have now. You're going to have things that we can't even possibly understand. So I think that if you're evil in real life, evil by definition, you're going to be evil in the afterlife, only a little bit better, because you can do things we can't. And these things are often referred to as demons, demonic. Oh, the big case with what was her name? Doris Dither, 1981, the entity case.
Yep.
Being raped by a entity, an unseen force.
Yep.
Is that a demon, or was it a rapist in real life? And he's just doing what he always did. That's the thing I think people forget the most, is we are all human beings. I don't care what color you are. I don't care what you believe. I don't care who you screw. I do not care. We are all human beings. And when you die, you're the same thing, consciously speaking, just different. We are all of bioelectrical makeup. That's science. That's proven. There is electricity in our bodies. Okay? Nobody can deny that. Energy is infinite. Energy does not die. What does it do? If you remember high school, go ahead.
Transforms, transmutes.
Right. It just simply changes form.
Yeah.
So, religious sects, and I'm not saying religion is wrong. I can't prove it either way. Religious sects will tell you that that is your soul that's leaving the body. I believe that energy moves because it does not die, and could be the cause of deja vu, clairvoyancy, possession, all of these things. Like, I just walked through this spot and all of a sudden, I feel like I've been here before. Maybe it's because you just walked through somebody else's energy who had been there before.
Yeah, yeah.
Good point.
It's all still there. Our entire universe, whatever that means, is one big tape recorder.
That's a good take on it.
Yeah,
It really
and
is.
it keeps looping and looping and looping and looping, as it were, in different probable realities simultaneously, in a holographic kind of way in other dimensions, so we can transmute it and move through it.
So your biggest question is, are these things happening voluntarily, or are they happening involuntarily? Is there intelligence behind these things? I did a radio show a couple nights ago, and I was talking to the guy about EVP, electronic voice phenomenon. How many of us know a Bob? You guys know a Bob?
I know about a dozen Bobs.
Yep.
Okay, how many of us know a Steven? You guys know a Steven?
I know
do
a
now.
few of those.
All right, correct. So when you're doing these ghost box sessions and you capture this voice, do you know in radio, the 3 most said words are yes, no, and hello?
Wow, yeah.
So when you're doing all this, it's all random. You capture this voice. Of course, everybody knows a Bob, and then you make it relevant to what you're doing.
And then you have the reaction factor, where everybody on the show is sometimes heightening the sensational part of it, and other times not. But it all factors into the experience the viewer has. And
Right.
if you're just tuning in, you're listening to Truth Be Told with Tony and Eddie.
And I'm Tony Sweet.
I'm Eddie Connor. We have with us Stephen Lancaster. He's the author of Dark Spirits, A Man Terrorized by the Supernatural. He is also a paranormal investigator. And we're having the best time talking to you, by the way.
We are. We are.
And so,
Great compliment.
Well, that's good.
It is.
That's good.
It is because you're very grounded. A lot. It's fun to see someone grounded. It's refreshing to me that you're an atheist, as it were, because you're not allowing other aspects bleed
Influence.
into your scientific hypothesis. And I think it's fun that you're grounded in it and you're not woo-woo with your head in the clouds and going, oh my God, a fairy just flew past me. And I'm like, no, I didn't. I'm sitting here in West Hollywood.
Well, here, I do want to just me about that. The colleagues that I work with, because I have to be objective.
Yeah.
I do have that. I have the Catholics. I have the Christians. I have the carpenters, the electricians, the military personnel, the law enforcement. I have all these people that work with me that can bring something to the table that I cannot. Because I look at it like this. If I take an investigation and I am well over 1,000 plus, and it makes a client feel better to bring in that person that is a Catholic and can say, hey, I can do this and make this happen. It doesn't hurt anything.
Mm-mm.
I remember a case I did in Spring Lake, North Carolina.
Oh, yeah.
And it was the story was amazing. That's what attracted me to it. And so we investigated, and I found nothing. But the people wanted some sort of cleansing. So a few of the investigators I worked with put a ring of salt around the place.
Uh-oh.
Did I think that had anything? I don't believe in that.
Right.
But you know what? It made the client feel better.
Yeah.
And maybe it did do something. I can't say otherwise. But to me, if you're going into this field, you have got to bring religion out of it.
Yeah.
You've got to.
But
Because that's paranormal to get.
Yeah.
Santa Claus.
Who's your-
That's paranormal.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, think about that. Think about when you were a kid.
It's true.
But it is.
You were told Santa Claus exists.
Yeah,
He doesn't?
Yeah, and you know what? I believe Santa does exist. And what I mean by that is when you tell enough people to the tune of millions and millions and millions of them, especially little kids, the same story in every household all across one country by itself, every single time, the exact same time, the very next year, over and over and over. And then you tell their kids, your kids, and they tell their kids and their kids and their kids. That is energy. That energy, that thought, that feeling, that frequency all culminates, and it's got to go somewhere. So, yeah, I believe in it in that way where it builds upon itself in the invisible realm. You know what I'm saying, Stephen?
I do.
But
and we could talk about that. But historically speaking, there was a Santa Claus.
yeah.
Yes.
And he did create toys, these little wooden things, and he brought them to privileged children or whatnot.
Yeah.
But I believe, if you want to talk about Santa Claus, that Santa Claus exists because he's in everybody.
Yes.
He's an emotion. He's that. Just he comes that one time a year where everybody's just like, hey, here, I got this for you, I built this for you or whatever. I think he's an emotion.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because a show I was on the other night, a guy asked me, he said, do you think that people can project and create these things? Do you think that they can, what they're actually seeing is because of them? I do, but not to the extent like it's the Matrix. I can't think of Fox Mulder and he just shows up. I think we all are influenced. And what I say in the book, early in the book, this is my third book, is that the monsters under the bed start in your head.
Yeah.
Whatever you think that monster is because of what you've been told. Your own perception of what that creature or what that fear is. Does that disprove it? Does that say there's not anything there? No, not at all. But your perception of it is a lot different than what it actually is.
I get that.
I get that too. And because of time, we have about 13 minutes left, and I want to make sure we talk about dark spirits.
Yeah, in the mysterious hotel room that drives occupants mad.
So tell us about this book. What influenced you? Was this based on yourself?
Well, yes. I write nonfiction. When I wrote the first book in 2009, I actually didn't write the first book in 2009.
Really?
Okay.
What? Do tell.
All I did was put all of my case files into the computer. I thought, oh man, I can stop handwriting these things and enjoy the 21st century and type everything into the computer. So I started with the most productive cases, the cases that produced what I believed to be paranormal phenomena. And I had sent it to a friend of mine at the time who wanted to read about these cases. He's like, yeah, let me hear about the good ones. So it was like 87,000 words, and he's like, dude, this is a book.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, are you serious? I said, people would read this? I just thought it was geek speak, EMF this, EMF that. This is how I did this. This is how I determined that. He said, no, dude. So I thought, okay, you know what? So I put it all into a book, and I decided to do it independently because I don't like being controlled by people. And I put it out independently. Within 3 months, a publishing company contacts me. Says, we found your book. Is there any way this is still available? I said, well, there's a way. So I signed a 3-book deal with them, as long as I have last say in things, to a degree.
Right.
And they re-released it. This is what I was talking about earlier, where they cut it all down, and just streamline it. Just blah, blah, blah. I don't like that, but whatever. They're the ones selling it. That's what they're good at. Let them go do it. And when it came to dark spirits, I wanted to do something different because the first 2 books were more of, I'm a paranormal investigator, and this is how I went about these things. This is how I disproved this, or I proved that. And that's fine. It's a niche book. Those are niche books to people who are interested in that kind of thing. But there's a human side to it.
Yeah.
And that's what I wanted to show with Dark Spirits. Like, what does this life, when you live this life, here are the cases, my darkest cases, and these cases, here's what they did to me.
Yeah.
Not necessarily like, here's a 50 on the EMF. This is what I walked away with, and it kept walking with me.
Oh, hell no.
That's what I wanted to talk about with Dark Spirits, the human side of it, the less mechanical side of it, the more humanistic side of it. That it affects your life. It causes divorce. It causes friendships to go away. When you decide to make your life about the afterlife, you lose exactly what you're living for.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's not anybody else out there doing this. You might have actually created another new aspect of the genre itself. Look at you all leading edge and stuff, Stephen.
Who's your Santa?
Hey,
that's right.
Who's your Santa?
So where's this mysterious hotel room that drives occupants mad?
There's actually an interesting story with this hotel. It's in this book, Dark Spirits, because like I alluded to earlier, it's not in and out in one night as far as investigations are concerned. These go on for years.
Yeah.
Same location. And this particular location, I have to be very careful with how I word things because
it's a business.
There was a movie about this location.
Oh.
a Stephen King book about this location.
Red rum.
And not that one.
Oh.
And basically, anybody who stayed for long periods of time in a particular room
Oh, yeah, I know. Okay.
died. And I can't say actually where it's located.
Right.
In the film that I'm talking about, they put it in New York.
Yeah.
It's not in New York. But in this particular room, people opened the window, stepped off, and killed themselves. Tragically.
Yeah.
People died of heart attacks. Within an hour, people would call the front desk. I've got to get out of this room. I don't know why. They were confused. They just did not want to be in that room. And I initially took the case in 2007, I think. And in the first book, it's called The Hotel Aiken. Get it? Aiken.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's what it's called in the first book. But I kept on the case, of course. And in this book, it's what it's called, the Piper Room. And the reason I call it the Piper Room is because it calls you back to this room.
Ooh.
Now the room, you do not stay in this room. It is now for housekeeping.
Oh.
They took the number
Give it to
off
the housekeepers.
outside, the whole 9 yards. So when I would go there to research, the team or whoever I was working with at the time, we would stay in other rooms and we would go down in intervals to this room. I have never in my life, I've never come across a mechanical device, anything that would make your EMF add a second decimal.
Oh.
Wow.
This room does that. And this room does affect you. You do feel the effects when it's really extreme. When EMF is really extreme, you do feel it. Women are more susceptible to it, but when it's really, really big, 500, 600, 700, we're not talking about a refrigerator. We're talking about 700 on an EMF.
Damn.
Okay, and that's what's happening in this room. So they stop running it out. It's just... But it keeps calling you to it. Like in the book, I talk about how I could not stop going back down to it because I was so curious. How is this possible? Why do I keep want to go back down to this room? And I eventually called it the Piper Room because it's like the Pied Piper.
Do you think, and I'm going to ask Eddie as a psychic, do you believe this may be like a vortex or a porthole or something?
I've heard that.
Because that's what pops into my head.
It feels that way. It sounds like, the old Greek tales about the sirens.
Mm-hmm.
It's got that essence to it, like they're like the sirens are down there in the portal calling you back.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's hard for me because I have so much to think about.
Yeah.
I tend to look at paranormal research like a paperclip. And you're probably thinking,
Why?
well, geez, yeah, why do you look
Why
at it
a
like a
paperclip?
paperclip? Well, when you take a paperclip, and we've all done it, and you rub it vigorously on a magnet, what happens to that paperclip?
It becomes magnetic.
Temporarily.
Yeah.
And you can pick up other little paper clips and, it's, oh, look at this, right? Well, that's how I look at paranormal research. And for me, that's where I have to determine a lot of the people that I work with, and including myself, like I said, years in these locations. Every week, every other weekend, I moved into locations to research them. So am I temporarily magnetized?
Yeah.
By the spiritual activity that's there. So when we go to a new location, and we've all seen it, and I write about it in Dark Spirits. That's kind of what Dark Spirits is it the same thing following you the entire time? And is it because of you that it's doing it?
Yep.
You go to this hotel. What if you never investigated the paranormal ever? Okay. And you go to a hotel, nothing happens. You're there at the hotel, you're in the hot tub, you're drinking wine, whatever it is that you do. Okay. But you do investigate the paranormal, and you just left a location that threw investigators against the wall, threw investigators down the stairs, was a very violent investigation. Then you go somewhere else, and all of a sudden you're seeing these same characteristics in a place that you never even heard anything like that. So that's where I'm at. You have to think about the responsibility, I guess.
Yes.
With what you do.
A similar example where we have now 3 minutes, but it's a similar example. You refer to the woman from the movie and the book, The Entity. Even after she fled the house and went to another house and another house, the entity, as it were, followed her. So she was one electromagnetic paperclip child.
Right. And I've seen that with so many people. And, Barry Taff, the parapsychologist who actually, back when you could actually get a degree in parapsychology, took that case on with a few of his investigators. And one of his investigators found himself hanged in the attic with an extension cord.
Wow.
And this was back in the late 70s.
Yeah.
This was before we can make this up and make a YouTube video. This was real.
Yeah, I read that book in high school, and I graduated in 80.
Well, you're old.
Oh.
Oh my God! Well, in 2 minutes, I want to make sure. I wish we could go on and on because these stories and your investigations are so fascinating, and you definitely know how to keep people on the edge of their seats.
I know.
We want to.
I'm not trying. I'm not trying. Really, I tell people all the time. I do not like this part.
Do you really?
I do not like the radio shows. I'm doing it because I'm told to do it.
Yeah.
I do not like the TV spots. I do not like the book signings.
You're good at it, though.
I just, whatever.
Well,
I don't like this part.
But like Eddie says, he always says, we can tell when people's passionate about what they do, and when you're passionate about it, you're definitely a storyteller.
And it's your purpose too. You can tell you're a man on a mission, and we appreciate that.
But where can people find you? I know the book's probably everywhere, Amazon and I think Llewellyn, and where else?
Every Barnes & Noble, every Books A Million. Anywhere books are sold, you can go in there and get it. I recommend if you really want to, it's a chronicle to me. I call it the Paranormal Investigator series.
Yeah.
Where it continues my stories, and some of the investigations in Dark Spirits started in the first book. So, I'm kind of showing you what I do. I'm putting you behind me, putting you behind the camera. Follow the investigations from the beginning. Go back and check out the first book, check out the second book, get this one. And of course, there's a documentary coming out here in a month or so.
That's great.
And that's an investigation that went on for 4 years. You've got to follow this stuff. This is not like you see on TV.
No.
But I tell people, I'm easy. It's not that way.
I was going to say I am too, but
I knew you would.
The weekend is coming.
Facebook.com/author Stephen Lancaster, and that's Stephen with a PH. That leads to everything. Because me and my publicist have to control Twitter and Monster Vision's Facebook page and all this other stuff. Everything that happens on Facebook.com/author Stephen Lancaster automatically happens on the other ones. So
Perfect.
you don't have to worry about the Twitter. You don't have to worry about Monster Vision's page. You don't have to worry about Llewellyn's page. Find that one, and it leads to everything else.
Brilliant. That's really smart.
That is smart.
So thank you, Stephen. Now, will you come
so
back
much.
and visit
Thank
us
you,
when
guys.
your next book comes out?
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
Perfect.
You've been great.
You've been amazing. So, Stephen Lancaster, we want to thank you guys for tuning in for another broadcast of Truth Be Told right here on Universal Broadcasting Network. And definitely we hope you enjoy our month of paranormal. At the end of the month, we're going to do a live seance. So it's going to be good. So we're going to take not a break, but we're going to take a get out of here so Char Vision can come in and do her thing. But we hope you guys stick around for that. Otherwise, go to our website, go to our iTunes and YouTube and iHeartRadio. You can check us out on all those sites, and we loved having our guests today. So we're out of here. Until next time, this is Truth Be Told with Tony and Eddie. I'm Tony Sweet.
I'm Eddie Connor.
And we're out. So we'll see you next time right here on Universal Broadcasting Network. Hey, thank you for listening to Truth Be Told with Tony and Eddie right here on Universal Broadcasting Network. Make sure you go to our iTunes page. Just type in Truth Be Told with Tony and Eddie Listen to us on iHeartRadio. Again, Truth Be Told with Tony and Eddie. And go to our YouTube channel, subscribe, and please leave a comment. We'd love to hear from you. So please support our sponsors and make sure you listen to us every Friday right here on Universal Broadcasting Network from 4 to 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Until then, have a good week.